Hello and welcome to Your Path to Success with Ruth Kearns-Vollman. I created this podcast to inspire, encourage and equip you on your career and life journey. And in this episode, you get to hear my interview with the wonderful Shedletzky. He's the author of Speak Up Culture, and his work as a speaker, facilitator and coach is all about empowering leaders to cultivate trusting, purpose-driven workplaces. We started this interview as LinkedIn acquaintances and finished feeling like friends who are invested in the same passion for leadership, which is about leaving people in the world around us better than we found it. In this interview, you'll hear Shed talk about his own journey, how challenges can become part of our purpose, about the power of making it safe and worth it for others to speak up, and the legacy he wants to leave to honor his grandfather, Zadie. Enjoy the interview. So today I'm here with Stephen Shedletzky, known to his friends as Shed. Shed, you're a coach, a facilitator, a public speaker, and an author. Welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. It's a delight to be here with you. I'm very excited as to where we're going to go and to share with your listeners.
Yeah, and I was saying just before that as I was preparing for today, we met via LinkedIn, if you like, and I discovered today as I was researching you a bit that we both did the coactive coaching course. And something came on in my head where I said to myself, oh, that's why I feel such a connection with this guy without really knowing him. And, you know, you talk a lot about safety, feeling safe, making it safe and worth it to speak up. And
Yes.
I must say that for me, the coactive coaching fundamentals course was the first time, I think, in my career, in my 30s, where I felt safe to show up. What was your experience of coactive? And knowing that some of my listeners will know what that is, but some of them may not.
Yeah. So Coactive and CTI is a coaching training organization. And you and I mean, what I love about it, Ruth, is it's community. So, what is a community? A community is a group of people who agree to grow together. Yeah. And I think a community shares common purpose, potentially, or at least aligned purpose, and certainly common and aligned values. And so not all algorithms are bad. The algorithm connected us because of shared connections and shared values. And if we get along and love and admire some of the same people, chances are there is an alignment with our values, which I love. I did coactive CTI training younger. I was in my I was in my mid 20s when I did CTI training. And I did the 5 courses, and then I went on and did the leadership program. And L.A. Redding, who was one of your front of room instructors, led my leadership program. And I love that woman to bits. She's such a powerful woman. Yeah. So I had a few friends who had gone through coactive coach training, and I just knew I wanted to do it. I didn't need to be sold. I saw how they were as human beings, how they reflected, how they were intentional with taking themselves on and growing and being kind and compassionate and powerful for all the good reasons leaders. And I went, I want me some of that. I knew it was a goal that when it was the right time and I could afford it, I would do it. Yeah. And for me, I describe it as a retraining in how to be human in a world that makes it very easy not to be human.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I did it for much the same reasons. In fact, a friend of mine, Keith, who is Canadian, came back from the weekend so energized. I was like, how come you can go on a course all weekend and be so energized? I said, you have to do it, Ruth. You just have to do it. So that's what sold me. Yeah.
Nice. Beautiful. Beautiful. So yeah, I love that we have that common connection.
Yeah. Now, you work today on what you call speak up culture. It's all about, as I said, making it safe and worth it to speak up. But that's not what you've been doing forever, right? Tell me about your early professional experiences and how that shaped you.
Well, so it's funny because, I didn't call it speak up culture, but some of my formative memories, I was definitely doing it.
Mm,
So, I know some of our sort of pre-episode chatter is around how weaknesses or trauma or challenges can actually transform to become strengths or part of one's purpose. And I'm a big believer of that.
mm,
So I grew up with a stutter. I still do have a stutter. It runs deep in my heritage. It is hereditary. I've learned how to work with it and am constantly working to overcome it, right? There are certain sort of chronic things that you never completely overcome. You are always overcoming. But I know intimately the feeling of voicelessness. I also remember as a 12-year-old kid, there were two campers at a summer camp that I went to that were actually from Switzerland, where you're based, who came over, and I remember coaching them on their beds. I didn't know I was coaching them. I was having a heart to heart with them on their intimacy challenges, on their challenges, trying to go on dates with others in this environment. So, I'm a really big believer, as you've pointed out in our discussion, hindsight is 2020. What's the quote? It's from the Danish theologian Soren Kierkegaard, that life makes sense looking backwards, but it must be lived forwards.
yeah.
And so, yes, now I call it speak up culture, but I've been doing it forever.
Mm,
My first professional experience was with an oil and gas company. And on my first day, September 7th, 2009, 1,000 people were let go post merger as I walked in. And so I walked into a tumultuous environment, and it was fascinating. I mean, I'm very grateful it was my first job and not something that I had been at for many years. I remember vividly the person whose cubicle was across from me. She had been with the company for over 30 years, and I could see the fear just like oozing out from inside out, waiting for her pink slip to arrive. And so I sort of had this front row seat and a bit of an outer body experience, watching how change, how uncertainty was impacting, of course, people's productivity, but also their health and well-being. And so that was my sort of rude welcome
mm,
into corporate life.
yeah. And so where did you go from there? What did that teach you? The front row seat.
So I've become fascinated, and if I could say, if you were to ask me, Ruth, like, what's the one thing, what's the one stake in the ground that I'm like, this is what my life and career is about? To me, it's about leadership.
Mm,
And leaders hold a disproportionate, actually, I'll take a step back. I'm not going to say leaders hold. Those who have influence,
yes.
which can
Mm-hmm.
either come in the form of authority, it
Mm-hmm.
can come in the form as you behaving as a leader does or ought to. But
Mm-hmm.
if you have influence, you have a disproportionate impact on the health, well-being, performance of the people around you. I liken culture to a pickle jar, to pickle brine.
Mm-hmm.
If you are in a role of leadership or you have greater influence, you have a disproportionate impact on the flavoring of that brine, on the
Yeah.
chemistry of that brine.
Mm,
And so that's what I'm obsessed with. I'm obsessed with how do the behaviors, the decisions, the intentions of those with influence impact people for better or for the worse, whether it is intended or unintended.
yeah.
That's my fascination. And so my front row seat to watching how behaviors, decisions, levels 3, 4, 7, 10 hierarchical levels or ranks above the people I was with, how it was impacting their health and well-being from that most senior level all the way down to their direct report, their boss, their peers. So
Mm,
that's my fascination.
mm,
And I want to help people have better experience of leading and being led, because I
yeah.
think it'll make the world a far better place.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I notice, and I'm going off on a bit of a tangent because you're talking about this now, is the sandwich, right? I often coach people who are somewhere in this sandwich of I'm trying to lead the people below, but I'm not creating the culture. And so we're always having this conversation around, well, what are you influencing? What is it within your circle of influence? And how can you speak up within what's possible? I'm wondering what your experience of that is.
Yes, sort of those in the middle of organizations, like you and I know, because I think we've both been there and we do a lot of work with folks who are in the middle, who they're not the most senior, they're certainly not the most junior, but they're squarely leading in the middle.
Mm.
And those folks are the only folks who have multi-directional influence.
Yeah.
The only. And it's actually enviable from more senior leaders because those in the middle actually have a pulse and a tangible impact and influence on those at their level, those above and below. Now, I like to say that both leadership and leader SHIT trickle down. And so it's really hard, it's harder to lead if you're not well led. And I say that subjectively as well as objectively, because sometimes you have someone who may be a great leader, they're just not for you right now. Like that's possible.
Yeah.
And so I don't like to label people as good leader, bad leader. You know, some leaders are effective for others, and some of the best leaders I know aren't a great fit or match for others based on that time and based on their sort of Venn diagram of them as individuals and them in relationship. You know, just happens. But leaders in the middle have influence. And even if you're not being led in the way you wish to, you still have an opportunity to lead up to the best of your ability, certainly lead side to side with your peers, and most definitely lead for those who you formally are in your span of care, whether they're your direct report or not. So that's the, you know, I really do focus on that middle because it's where change lives and dies.
It is. I agree. I think it's hard. It can be hard, but it can also be empowering. If you take the influence that you have and you have that perspective, run the perspective of, you know, wishing that you had more influence or wishing, do you see what I mean? I think it's a lot of perspective. You can see it as negative or positive.
Yes, and it is both, but it is those who have a healthy internal locus of control who focus on, all right, what is and what is out of my control and what is in my span of influence and span of care. And to steal from my friend Rich Davini, who's a retired Navy SEAL, wrote the book The Attributes. He has a term called honor the antagonist. Right. So in any theatrical production, you have your protagonist, you have your antagonist. Your protagonist is a person, thing, force that is for the main idea. And your antagonist or antagonists are your person, thing, force that are against the main idea. And this is life. I mean, if you have a life or you watch a Broadway show that's just up and to the right all the time, it's like, well, that was a little too rosy, idealistic, optimistic, boring. It's the undulation that keeps things interesting and allows for growth.
Exactly.
And so I think there is a way in which we can go, okay, what might be, whether intentionally or unintentionally, what might be a headwind, what might be an antagonist. It could be something within ourselves, a strength that derails or a limitation. And how can we use it as this is here to teach me? This is here to help me grow. This is the challenge I'm facing. Can I still be at choice in this? Or do I want to make a different choice and not face this antagonist or challenge? Because there are antagonists that aren't healthy. And I think there is a moment where you go, you know what? I don't need to keep fighting this battle. I've grown as much as I want to from this, and I want to choose different because it's actually causing burnout or entropy or degradation and not rejuvenation.
Yeah, for sure. I want to come back or weave back somehow to your story because we've done a little bit of deviation from that, and to hear about the part of your life where you worked with Simon Sinek, because you were, I think, in his organization for around 13 years or so, or a bit more.
Yeah, so I was on the team for 10 years. I still do work with them as an associate, as a partner, so I'm still involved. So yeah, I've been a part of Simon's organization now for over 13 years. I was on the formal team for 10 and a very early joiner of that team. I was the fourth person to join that team back in late 2011, early 2012.
So tell me a little bit about how that choice happened for you.
I mean, it was something I definitely caused, which is fun, right? There's a difference between causing things to happen, allowing things to happen, and I think it is healthy to have both. But I certainly, made it happen, which is really fun looking back and sort of a pat on my back of like, cool, like I did that. I networked, I built relationships, and I made it happen. And they took a risk on me, which I'm so grateful for. So it was quite early in my career after the first job I had at that oil and gas company, the one with 1,000 people let go first day. I was introduced to Simon's work. I became quite miserable at that first company. It was really hard. I mean, I was never clinically diagnosed, but I'm pretty sure I was in a depression. I was definitely lost, didn't have motivation. It was a hard time. And I was being about to be moved into a marketing role. And I said to someone who very quickly became a friend and a mentor, a guy by the name of James Powell, I said to him, I'm terrified to move into a marketing role for an organization, quote, that I don't believe what they sell or how they sell it. And he went, watch this video. And he sent me Simon Sinek's very well-known, famous, I think third most watched talk on TED.com, or at least it was at one point. I think at one point it was number 2, How Great Leaders Inspire Action, the Start With Why. And I successfully procrastinated for 2 months and didn't open that email or watch the talk, but then I finally did.
Okay.
I think I watched it in August 2010. And I just sort of had this puppy dog like, everything this guy says, like, I'm aligned with. I just never thought about it that way. And I think that's a lot of people's experience with Simon's work, because his brilliance is articulating oftentimes complex and even disparate ideas, but communicating them in a connected and simple way. And if we can understand complex things with simple words, we can share them, we can do something with them, we can actually have a change and an impact. So I did another quick stint at Ernst & Young as a change management consultant, which was good. I learned quite a bit and have ended up partnering with EY quite a bit over the years, more so on the vendor side than being part of their team. But yeah, I made it happen. I reached out to Simon and team. I developed relationships. I just wanted to help. I so believed in what they were doing, their cause of a more inspired, safe, and fulfilled world. And it was if I was just banging on the door saying, I'm here. How can I help? Here's what I'm doing. Can you help me help you? And it was just a right time, right place. They invited me onto the team. The first couple of years being on that team was tough. I felt like I was a little bit of a cobbler's child without shoes, in the sense that I was doing work. Simon describes it as like what is the movie where you're painting the fence? I'm forgetting the movie
Karate
reference,
Kid.
but Karate Kid.
I watched it over the holidays.
Oh, nice. So like they had me responding to fan email and customer service requests, and I'm very good at writing a email. I'm just not good at writing 15. And I'm not good at repetitive tasks. I get bored easily. And I'm not good at building systems. So I didn't think to build.
ChatGPT didn't exist.
And ChatGPT didn't exist, exactly. And even if it did, it isn't fulfilling for me to just copy. Like I want to do the human work. I want to be part of doing the inspired, safe, and fulfilled work, not the gears and the machines behind. I want to do the work, with people. And so it was a hard time, but I ended up sort of just making this choice of, am I going to be in this or am I not going to be in this? And if I'm going to be in this, I've been given a room in this house, and I'm just going to own my room. And I sort of made that shift and that decision.
Okay.
And that built a ton of trust with the team, and them seeing me, I hate to use the word pay my dues, but as a young, naive, arrogant millennial, they needed to see that I was worth investing in. They needed to see that I wasn't in it for the glory. I was in it to serve. And when I sort of made that shift, things opened up wonderfully. And yeah, I mean, I ended up being on that team, as I said, for 10 years. And there are certainly some ups and downs, but on the whole, so grateful for my experience. I learned a ton. And it's, as I'm building my own organization, there are so many things that I've learned that I'm using to now build my own team and my own organization, my own movement around a speak up culture, or contributing to the speak up culture movement with so many of the lessons I learned from Simon and his team.
Yeah. So speaking of that, how did you know it was time to move on? I think that's a question we often, you referred to this a bit earlier in the context of, sometimes we're learning from something when we were talking about the tough stuff and the antagonists and all. Like sometimes we're learning, sometimes we're not learning anymore from it, and it's time to say stop. But this, I don't know to what extent this was kind of the other experience. We can get comfortable sometimes in a place, and it's quite nice, but maybe there's a call to do something a bit more, to step out, as it were.
Yeah. So for me, what had happened was COVID hit, and it was a time of both fear, uncertainty, ambiguity, as well as creation and excitement,
Right.
and literally making the future. And so when COVID hit, we needed to change our business model, because north of 80% of our revenues came from hopping on planes and going in rooms and giving keynotes and doing workshops. And so I was very much helping to lead, how do we take what we do in room and do it in this setting?
Yeah.
Over Zoom and MS Teams and the like. And so it was actually, though it was exceptionally hard because I was in my basement office, my wife and two kids. My wife was on mat leave at the time. I had a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. It was hard, but it was also a time where I felt that I was building, I was contributing. It was fantastic. There was a shift in leaders on that team, and it got to a point where there was just a bit of a clash. I reached a level where I went, okay, I can no longer do my version of good here. And it wasn't against, it was just okay, and I had reached a level where I was reporting into the 3 owners of the company. There was nowhere else I could go. And it was just this notion of, okay, like I'm trying, and there's a misalignment, and I still believe wholeheartedly in this cause of a more inspired, safe, and fulfilled world. I'm going to contribute. I'm so grateful that I'm continuing to contribute with them, as well as doing it in my own way as well. And so Ruth, I fully thought I would be on that team for the rest of my life. And something happened where it went, okay, there's now a sort of a clash in approach with these new leaders that have come in, and that's okay. And it's time for me to find different and new ways to contribute to the same cause, while still finding the same ways to do it as I have for over 10 years with them.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because there's a realization sometimes that this is no longer the place where we can do our best, give our best. I think you used a phrase which I didn't quite capture there, something about good. You could no longer give your best. Here, there's something else. How did you get to the what it was? Now, where you're moving from and where you're moving to?
Yeah. So through a lot of reflection and a lot of conversation with mentors, but really sort of the biggest impetus was it would have been, I think, 2021, around this time of year. Again, it sort of became clear to me that, the role I'm in, I'm no longer doing my version of good. There's nowhere else I can go on the team. I think I want to keep doing the speaking and facilitating, but now I have this sort of gap in space of other question mark of what that other could be. And I had made, whether you call it a New Year's resolution or just sort of a commitment, around this time of year 4 years ago, I committed to just saying yes more. And so because I had been doing work with Simon, because I had built a bit of a profile, especially on LinkedIn, I would get tons of people reaching out. And oftentimes they would reach out and say, can you come speak at this event? And now the bar to say yes to do an event was far lower, because it didn't necessarily require travel. It required an internet connection. I would just say yes more. And there was one opportunity with someone who's become a friend, Barry Engelhardt, to be a keynote speaker at the Society of Human Resources event for St. Louis chapter.
Okay.
virtual event. It was October of 2021. And I just said, yeah, sounds great. And I said, either I can do Simon's content, and this is typically what the fee structure is. And he said, well, that's my entire budget for all of my speakers, so no. And then I said, okay, well, I can either do my own stuff or I can do something with my dear friend who I mentioned before as well, Rich Davini. And he said, yeah, sounds great to either do your stuff or something with Rich. And I said, wonderful. And so I hung up the phone with, or the Zoom with Barry, and I texted my pal Rich and I said, hey, Rich, are you free on X date in October 2021? And he said, no, I'll be in Oklahoma giving a talk. And I went, uh-oh. And so I said yes to doing a talk on my own content without really having my own content yet. Now, I said yes in March or April of 2021, and it wasn't until I think June or July, probably July, that I got an email from the organizers of that event who said, hi, we're so excited for you to speak. Please click on this link and submit your talk title and description. And I went, oh. And it was sort of this like perfect pressure cooker.
Yeah.
I remember putting my kids to bed. I remember what shorts I was wearing that night in the summer. And I sat on the couch, the sofa upstairs, and I went, what's my message? Like, what do I have?
Mm.
And the term leaders listen down came up, which is everyone says, listen up. That's the convention. My experience of what great leaders do is they listen down. Now, we ended up calling it speak up culture because that's far more affirmative. I think listen down could be pedantic or authoritative. But sort of the inception was I said yes to something on my own content before having my own content, and it was the perfect pressure cooker.
Yeah.
And as I prepared for that talk and delivered that talk by about August, September, and I was giving that talk in October, August, September, I had about 30 pages of notes. Just saying, I got onto something here. Was introduced to my publisher, Page Two, and we were off to the races. So it was really saying yes to something before I was ready or had anything. That was the pressure cooker and sort of kicking the butt to create.
Well, that's great. No, I just like I'm just saying it like that because I think saying yes more and then allowing ourselves to be stretched, like it was a bit outside your comfort zone. You didn't know what you were going to do. Sometimes that's what we need, isn't it?
Yeah.
It sounds like you had so much inside that needed to come out in a way that you needed some way of formulating it.
Yes, and it was I caution against the advice of say yes more because it's contextual. Say yes more aligned with your values. Say yes more aligned with your capacity and what you do have to give, because it's really easy to either burn out or lose ourselves if we're saying yes without filters. So it's say yes with filters. It's like say yes to more of the stuff that feels right, if even a stretch, and if even you don't feel quite ready. And I also think, there are certain gender dynamics with that. There are certain, I think it is easier for me potentially as a white male to just go, I'm going to say yes more. It could be easier. I'm aware of that. But I think just for anyone to go, okay, what do I care about? What are my values? And how can I find an opportunity to say yes more?
You're absolutely right, of course, because I wasn't thinking about it through the filter of gender. But as you say that to me, I know how much, particularly women and maybe some men too,
Yeah.
say yes to things to help out other people or because they feel they should rather than because it's aligned with, this is what I'm about. This is what I want to say yes to. And so if an opportunity arises, I'm going to say yes to that.
Yeah. And I also like some of it is personality. Some of it can be gender dynamics. Some of it can be whether you're part of a minority or not. But it is easier for some people to do things that are messier and to fail
Yeah.
publicly
Yeah.
It is easier for, that's something that I'm aware that I can't just say, you should take more risks and
Well,
fail and be met. Like, that's not like, I think to everyone, to each of our degree of what my comfort and growth zone is different from what yours is and some of your listeners. But I think for all of us, there's an opportunity to stretch into whatever our growth zone may be.
yeah. Perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to come on to talking about a little bit about the book and vulnerability. So that's what's going through my mind as I ask this question. Your book is about safety, creating safety for others, creating a culture of safety so that it is safe and worth it to speak up. And sometimes when we want something, is aligned with our values and our purpose, we have to create the safety for ourselves to speak up.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's going through my mind.
Yes. Yes. So there's someone who's become a new friend. I love his work. His name is Tim Spiker. And he has a philosophy that I agree with wholeheartedly, which is leaders are inwardly sound and others focused, and in that order. The way I define leadership is it's the attempt, the intention to leave people and the world around us better than when we found it.
Yes.
And in order to do that service-oriented work,
yes,
we have to come from a place of security, of feeling not complete or perfect, but whole.
yes.
Right? In CTI language, we call this naturally creative, resourceful, and whole, right? Not perfect. And so absolutely. So yes, my work is all about how can we create environments in which it is safe, psychologically safe, and worth it to speak up, to take risks, to try new things, to fail, to admit mistake, all of it. And there is a requisite amount of safety with oneself. And if folks don't feel safe to speak up, there are at least two areas to work, to examine or look at. One is the environment and the people around me and their behavior. Does it make me feel safe and worth it to speak up? As well as, can I look inside of myself? And how do I feel myself? And where can I grow? And there's a balance. If you only look at one and not the other, right? If you only look at the environments and the people, that's an external locus of control, and you're not looking at anything internal. If you're only looking at yourself, you're not looking at environmental factors, and you might actually get into a dangerous zone where you're overly critical of oneself and focusing too much on self without this balance of what's mine to own, where do I need to heal, how can I grow, as well as what are some of the challenges and opportunities in the environment and the people around me as well. It's both.
Yes, and with that definition of leadership, which I may not remember absolutely perfectly, but is about kind of leaving the world better than we found it,
People in the world, yes. The attempt to leave people in the world around us better than when we found it.
Yes. That is when we then provide that for others through our leadership, the safety for them to speak up.
Yes.
Because we are within a culture and we influence the culture. I always called it the thermostat effect. We can all be a thermometer and measure the temperature, but we want to be a thermostat where we can, start to change the temperature by our own behavior and the way we show up.
Yes. Yes. I mean, so leadership development, and I'm sure this has been your experience too, or I'd love to see your experience, is in the hundreds of leadership development programs I've either been a part of or facilitated in or observed or seen or heard of. Every single one seems to start with a module on self. Yes. And there's no mistake of it. The work of leadership is first and foremost, hang on a second, what's my instrument? How can I play it on tune and in key? Yeah. How can I explore it? As well as how can I best harmonize with others and their instruments? And then it's now how can I be in a role in which I can help others discover their instrument and better harmonize with others and so on and so forth. That's the work of leadership.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I think we'd better talk about the book.
Sure. I'm up for it.
I think what I'm interested in, I loved reading your book, so I can say that.
Thank you.
It's fun to read. It's powerful. You've got some powerful stories in there. It's also very practical, practical leadership. But what I'm interested in for my listeners is, what did it take for you to write the book?
Help.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I think my experience and so A is I played to my strengths. Maybe there are some people who are able to lock themselves in a room alone and just create, and that's not me. I knew that a blank page intimidated me. I knew that I'd written chapters, but I'd never written a book, and so I got help. I had a brilliant developmental editor from my publisher, Page Two, Kendra Ward. I had a brilliant writing partner for the first draft of the book, Ariel Hubbard. I had a brilliant research partner in Alejandro Stevens, who's on my team, and so I stacked the deck in my favor. Deadlines were my friend. The hardest part for me was reading and writing the book 17 times over, just the tediousness and the command find. Did I write about that already? And where was that? And I haven't, and did not, that's hard, but it went smoother than I thought it would. And the only reason it did was because of the amazing, caring, talented, aligned, wonderful people that I worked with who helped me challenge myself and who challenged me to make it as good as we possibly could.
And that is a lesson in leadership right there also.
Oh, yeah.
We cannot do things alone. We need others. We need others' strengths. We need, yeah.
Yeah. We can try to do things alone, but it just won't go as well. What is the African proverb? To go fast, go alone, to go far, go together.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So as we start to draw to a close, Shed, I want to ask you one of those questions. What would you love your legacy to be? You talked about leadership, about having the intent to leave people and the world better than we found it. What's that for you?
Yeah. Thank you so much. That's a very personal and touching question, and it makes me reflect and it hits me because it's such a big, profound, wonderful question. A few things come to mind. I mean, one, I'm really proud that we came out with this book and that people like you all over the world are reading it, and you're finding it engaging and interesting and practical and helpful. I mean, yay,
And funny.
legacy. Thank you. And funny. That's great. And so, in some respects, I'm proud of what has already happened. When I hear the word legacy, I have to think of my grandfather, because my grandfather sacrificed so much to give his two sons and his grandchildren a shot at life. My grandfather was a Holocaust survivor. He fought in the Polish army when the Germans invaded in 1939. He was imprisoned in a prisoner of war camp, hiding his Jewish identity for 2 years, escaped, walked home at night only for about 6 to 8 weeks, married his childhood sweetheart who refused to give him up for dead, my grandmother Eva, and then led a group of 7, which became 5, and they had to give away their firstborn while they were in hiding until the war ended. And my grandfather led this group of people hiding in barns and cornfields in the rural Polish countryside. And he ends up surviving. He ends up eventually coming to Canada. And I remember distinctly so my first job at the oil and gas company, I was fired in a very George Costanza way. I was mentoring interns, a disproportionate number of which turned down full-time job opportunities, citing conversations with me. I was toxic within an environment that wasn't right for me. So that was right. My next job at Ernst & Young, I left. I started doing coaching training. I knew my passion was in speaking, coaching, and facilitating and leadership development. And I took that leap and left and ended up joining Simon's team. But my grandfather called me. At the time, he was 95. And he said in his thick Polish accent, Stephen, what are you doing? you're throwing your life away. Do you know how much I've sacrificed to give you an opportunity? And we called him Zadie. I said, Zadie, I did this for you. He was a butcher. He even, if you look at how he survived the Holocaust, somehow he did it on his own terms. He avoided camps. He survived in the way that he wanted, which is mind-blowing. Like, he created that. And so I said, you have worked for someone else in your career for 6 months when you arrived in Canada and learned this market and then started your own butcher shop. And I said, I'm following in your footsteps. And that really shut him up quickly. And he said, fine, just don't sell drugs. And I'm very happy to share that I haven't done that yet. So my legacy is to honor his. Yeah. I remember sitting in the cubicle at that first job, looking at that colleague across the way who had been at the company for 30 years and was, scared and trembling. And I went, gosh, I have to do more. And I went, what was my grandfather doing at this time in his life? And the answer is he was, either training in the Polish army or hiding in barns and cornfields from Nazis. And I went, I cannot let that sacrifice go in vain. And so the next book I will do, I'm going to write my grandfather's memoir. We lost him. He passed away in 2014, August 2014. And I have to write that story. I owe it to him. I owe it to the world. So, yeah, legacy is very much as a father. For me, success is the ability to sit outside in nature somewhere, have my life partner, my wife Julie, our kids Sophie and Jack, and their kids. That's all I want. And it's very much what my father now has, my parents now have. So I have brilliant footsteps to follow in their lead.
That is wonderful. And I'm very touched as you talk about your grandfather, because I feel like speak up culture is what he didn't have. He was a leader and he led his family and other people to safety. Yeah. So I'm very touched.
Thank you. Thank you.
I can't wait to read your second book. So that will be wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Well, it's been wonderful talking to you. So as we close, can you just tell people how to get your book, how to find you online and so on?
Yes, my book is available in some very fine and not so fine bookstores all over the world, both retail, online, all the places. Speak Up Culture is the book. And you can learn more about me and my work at Shed Inspires, SHED Inspires.com. I believe I'm the only Stephen Shedletzky in the entire human population. It is unlike, it's not Smith in Poland, apparently. It's a quite unique name. So all you handfuls of Shedletzkys out there, please name your children wisely. But if you Google my name, you will find me. And I'm most active on LinkedIn, which is how we connected as well.
Yes. Wow. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity to have me and all the prep you did to make this a great conversation.
Yeah. What a great conversation that was. I found the part where we talked about learning from the antagonists in our lives particularly relevant. And so I wonder what challenges you are facing right now. Are they internal or external? What are they teaching you? And what choices will you make as a result? Now, I know these are big questions and it can feel daunting to look at them on your own, and it's easy to get stuck in rumination. So if you'd like a 30-minute free coaching conversation to explore this area, then please do go to my website and book an appointment. I'll make sure the link is in the show notes. And I do sincerely recommend Shed's book, Speak Up Culture. It's a great read with practical examples. You can follow Shed on LinkedIn and find out more about his work at shedinspires.com. My final encouragement as I sign off is to remember to do something to leave the people and the world around you better than you found them today. Focus on your circle of influence because you have the power to make a difference.